Hello, everybody. Tonight we have our special guest, Garrett Hartle. I think majority of everybody, unless you've been living underneath a rock, knows who this gentleman is. He has been in the hobby for a very, very long time. A lot of people may know him from when he was at Prehistoric Pets, but now he's the king of the super dwarfs and everything dwarf nowadays. Anyhow, thanks for coming on tonight. And Chip, start off.
Well, yeah, I'd like everybody to know that, Reach Out Reptiles is in the house, and it's a very good podcast tonight because this man has got some history. I first met Garrett probably, it's coming up on 10 years now when we
Yeah,
first met face to
pretty
face.
easily. I was going to say, I met both of you guys quite a long time ago. Like
Yeah.
way longer than 99.9% of people, had ever heard of who I was.
Yeah,
So,
and like James said, a lot of people know you from Prehistoric Pets, but you've got a history since before Prehistoric Pets that a lot of people don't know about.
well, you
And
guys have a history too. I won't tell the stories of how we first met and some of the things that were going on with either one. Both of you guys, actually. Some pretty good
Yeah.
times back then.
Yeah. Yeah. But where we want to start off is because you've got such a big YouTube channel right now, and you've done a lot of great things, and you're probably one of the nicest guys in the hobby. Literally, I don't hear anything bad about you. You keep stuff so positive, and you've done so much, but there's so much that I personally, just hearing people, don't really know about you. And I would like to get into the history of how you became so fascinated with reptiles, how you became into retics, and just before all of the stuff where you've gotten popular, and how you started Reach Out Reptiles too. So start us off with your humble beginnings.
Oh, sure, man. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me on. You know what I mean? You guys have both been, people that I've looked up to in the industry for a long time. And I think maybe not as much with you, Chip, but like me and James, when we first met, it was always kind of like Jason Reed was breeding and selling and vending at these shows, and you were hanging out with him. And Jay Brewer was breeding and vending at the shows. And I think you and I were kind of like the right hand man guys sitting over there on the side talking to each other and stuff in the beginning with a lot of that stuff. Do people still call you Jampless, James, or is that too old
Yeah,
school?
I do.
yeah.
Did you ever get any jamps? You still jampless? I don't know.
I'm still jampless. Yep.
Oh, buddy, we're gonna have to help you fix that out. Yeah, that would be good. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then Chip was just a good time. I remember the first time I met you, I thought you were nuts because you're talking about living in kind of the extreme north of the US, but with all these exotic reptiles and I'm not talking small reptiles, I'm talking large numbers of large animals that you're keeping through the winters and all that stuff. And I just thought these guys are nuts. But yeah, because I came from, I'm here in Pittsburgh now, so I got to deal with the winter thing. But I came from Southern California originally, and boy, what a trip moving a collection and stuff like that. And it's a whole new learning process. I remember my first couple of years, I was like, I got like one or two clutches out of, a potential like 15 or something that I was shooting for back then. I was like, I don't think I know how to breed snakes anymore. I don't know what's going on over here. It was a whole new learning curve. So it was interesting.
Adjustment with weather and barometric pressure and everything. It's a huge hit.
It's like learning to write with your left hand or your offhand or whatever after doing it one way your whole life. Yeah, it's totally different. But yeah, I mean, so like I got my start. I don't know what it is. There's some weird multi-gene recessive thing that happens with us reptile guys where we pop out of nowhere. None of our parents or families ever were into reptiles. I know there's a number of people like this, and we just grew up catching whatever we could in the backyard, that kind of thing. So I was always just chasing lizards and stuff like that. And I remember coming from Southern California, like locally, one of the coolest things you could catch was like an alligator lizard. They're like the big ones that bite really hard. Or I remember the first time I met my first coach whip, I thought it was a carrot. The tail was sticking up out of the dirt. I was like, what was that? I picked it up and a whole snake came up and it bit me and it turned and ran. I was like, well, I got to go catch it now to find out if it was venomous or what. I don't know, just being a dumb kid. Like I didn't even know what we had in the area or anything. So it was just anything and everything in the beginning. And I had very much like there's still a lot of people that do this. I think the whole like pet tuber craze has brought it back around, where, you know, for a long time there, you were a leopard gecko guy or a ball python guy or a boa guy or girl or whatever the case may be. But, you know, when I was a kid, you just wanted to have one of everything. And there was no reason or like place for that when the whole world started chasing like morph projects, right? Everybody funneled down into 5 species that had a lot of options for morphs, and there they stayed. But now with the pet tuber thing and people kind of getting YouTube famous or Insta famous or whatever, because they're like doing a tour with my 78 different species of animals, you know, it's kind of all come back. And all the big pet tubers, I'm poking fun at them a little bit, but not really. I respect what they do. I just think it's ridiculous that it's a thing, but I guess that's what everyone would have said about me too. Snake breeding, son, that's not a thing. You got to get a real job. You know what I mean? Right. But I think it's ridiculous that it's a thing, that now that these people have had success and even financial success, they've got the money to reinvest in what they love. They all built themselves basically a big zoo. You know what I mean? Jay Brewer is that way. That's all he does. He's, you know what I mean? He's there living #living the dream, you know, in a zoo and all that stuff. And then you got people like Snake Discovery, and I mean, even Kevin McCurley, all of these guys, whether it's like, you know, kind of the original founders of the industry or new kids that are popping up from everywhere, they're all kind of going the same way now. It's social media, isn't it? It's driving everything. So kind of interesting.
Even lived with his animals.
Oh, trust me, I didn't realize how like integrated it was. Have you guys been to Nerd before?
Yeah.
So, oh, you haven't? Oh, you got to go. It's pretty cool. I was just there for like the first time last year, and I didn't realize, like, you know, you walk through like the retic room and the monitor room, and there's the dwarf caimans, and here's the office where everything gets done, and they go one more door and it's Kevin's bedroom. It's like, that's it. You know what I mean? That's the upstairs. That's what you usually see on YouTube. And then downstairs is just a pet shop, good old timey pet shop. So yeah, crazy. But I mean, it's cool. I'm glad to see the industry adapting. But I got my start with just everything. The first thing I bred was actually Southern Pacific rattlesnake. That was my first reptile species to breed. Yeah. And I was I caught a couple and felt bad for them because it was like weird year, and I kept them together for a while, and, you know, sort of hiding them in my room from my parents, which is hard to do with a rattlesnake. They like to announce their presence, but I managed to pull it off. And then I noticed my female was gravid. I convinced my folks, just let me keep it until she lays her babies. You know what I mean? And got baby rattlesnakes out of it, and it ended up being a really cool thing. So, but other than that, I mean, I remember in high school, my mom had a rule. Well, she had 2 rules for my reptiles. So my folks were pretty supportive in kind of like a we won't even pay attention way. Like, you could do your own thing. I'm not going to buy anything for you, but if you got your own money, spend it how you want. So my 2 rules were this growing up. One was they can't, like, your collection can't get so big that it overtakes your bedroom. They got to all fit in your bedroom. You can't have them all over the house, right? And then the second rule was my mom hated snakes. And she was kind of the old school, like, only good snake is a dead snake mentality. So she's like, I don't care how expensive it is or how rare it is. If I find a snake in my house, I don't care if it came from outside or in your room, I'm cutting its head off with a shovel. So don't ever let a snake escape. You know what I mean? And it took me a long time actually to convince her to let me have snakes. No joke. I know you'll appreciate this, Chip. She allowed me to have an American alligator as a pet before she let me have even like a corn snake, because she was like, no, I hate snakes. You know what I mean? So I had a big American alligator, well, not huge, but 6-foot American alligator living in a horse stall.
Yeah, you know? That's big for, you know.
It wasn't small. Yeah, it was big enough to do damage, but small enough to still be quick. You know what I mean? So, like, in that dangerous
That's the most dangerous. Stage. Like, they're the agile at 6 foot. You can handle a 10-foot gator pretty easily. A 6-footer, they can get you a lot better than a 10-footer.
Especially when the keeper is a, you know, brain dead 16-year-old like I was. You know what I mean? So kind of crazy. But I didn't go out to get that guy on purpose. I ended up rescuing it. But at any rate, that was it. I kept everything. And so once I finally did convince my mom to let me keep snakes, because it was always like me catching them and hiding them like under my bed or stashing them in a lizard cage somewhere or whatever until she'd find me out and I'd be like, oh, and I had to let them go. But they were always the native stuff, that we had out there, which is great. In Southern California, there's tons of cool native stuff, rosy boas and, all the rattlesnakes, a lot of pituophis and stuff like that. But the first exotic animal I had to give her, I was like, you don't have to buy me anything for Christmas or my birthday or anything else this year. And I'll buy it for myself. You just got to let me buy. It was a little, I believe it was Nerian Jaya carpet python. So long ago now, I can only go off of like my memory of the snake. You know what I mean? I don't even have a lot of pictures of it from back then. But that was my first snake. And just like it is with everybody in the reptile industry, you take a long time to get that first one. And then what happens? You got 18 more by the end of the month. You know what I mean? So it was only a couple months later. I went to, I don't know if either of you guys would remember this, but they used to have a big reptile show in Southern California called IRBA, International Reptile Breeders Association. It was put on by Philippe de Vosgeli, the guy who did the Bavaria magazine. Yeah, most people know him. So he put on a huge reptile show back then. It was great. That's when I met like Dan Maliri and Bob Applegate, Randy Wright, and a lot of the guys that, were kind of the Californian keepers. But we actually had, I believe it was Bob Clark. But again, this was like old memory. It might have been Jay Brewer. But it was one of these guys that had a bunch of retics, and someone had a wild caught Jampea. So it was only a couple months after I'd gotten my carpet python. I loved it. I got a Jampea, and that thing hated me, but I loved it. It was about 3 feet long, kind of a fresh import. I remember having to, go through worming it and all that kind of stuff. But boy, that little sucker hated me. I got a bunch of pictures of me like bleeding while I'm holding it, smiling like, hey, look at my retic, and it was a squirrely little thing and everything else. But there's something about retics, you guys know this, that you can connect with them on a deeper level than you can most snakes, right? So if it's more like having a lizard or a crocodilian or a tortoise or some of these animals that do, actually form bonds with their owners and stuff. You don't get that with a lot of snakes, right?
No.
So, yeah. And so everything I had after that, every time I had a snake, I just kind of ended up being like, I don't know. I thought I wanted this species. I'd pick up, and I had hundreds of different snakes, in my room in high school. Remember the you can't outgrow your room rule? I started sleeping on a couch in the family room because I needed more room for tanks. And I remember counting at one point I had over 400 reptiles in my room in high school that I was, living in my bedroom, which is basically the reptile room on the other end of the house. And I didn't really have a bedroom anymore at that point.
Wow, I thought I was bad. That's crazy.
Oh, no, it's bad. It's basically like me living in, your facility now, but as a 16-year-old. I had a huge croc monitor. I had my own bathroom in that bedroom, like attached, right? So I had a huge croc monitor that had free range of the bathroom. And he was gnarly. He would attack you all the time. So if you wanted to take a shower, you had to bring like an offering of meat, like, oh, here, eat it. And you could distract him long enough to go get in the shower. And then while you're in the shower, you had to kind of like scoot the big snapping turtle to the other side of the tub long enough so you could like get your soap off and everything and wash it, and then plug the drain back up and fill it back up for the snapping turtle. I mean,
I had one in my bathtub too.
Yeah, I do not recommend these husbandry techniques to any of your listeners. This is just true stories of me being a dumb kid. You know what I mean? And there wasn't a lot of books back then. Like I said, aside from like twice a year, a big reptile show that I would geek out at, I didn't have any reptile people around me. I didn't know anybody. So very much just kind of like self-taught. And the way I grew up, my dad was really into horses. If you've ever seen my dad, here, I'll see if I can find a picture for you real quick. He looks like the Marlboro Man. If you imagine the Marlboro Man, that's basically my dad. I'll show you a picture what I mean. And so we used to actually work with a lot of wild horses, Mustangs and stuff. We'd go to these Mustang roundups, and they get all the horses up off of the government land or private land or whatever, and then they would. Oh, do they still do that? Yeah.
Yep.
So
every year.
Here's this probably won't turn out that good on here. Let's see if I can do it without a reflection. But that's my dad.
We can see it. That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's how I grew up. My alligator was just like 3 stalls over to the left where the covered stalls started. But that's him on a horse named Rio. So I grew up. What we would do is we would rescue these Mustangs. Pay the landowner or BLM or whatever. It's like $25 or something. You can catch your own Mustang, basically, and you take it home. And then you would have, if you're familiar with the Mustang competitions, it's an obedience training thing. You take a horse, I almost said a snake. You take a horse that's never seen a person before, basically, and you got 3 months with it, and you eat, sleep, breathe the same air as this horse for 3 months, and then you compete against other cowboys that are doing the same thing at the end of 3 months. So it's very intuitive. It's very much like get into the horse's psychology, figure out how to work with it, learn from the animal what it wants. And, the whole beginning stage, this thing looks at you as a predator, right? You got eyes in the front of your head, not the sides. So they think you're trying to eat them the whole time. And so you're trying to convince them that you're not, and that you guys can work together towards a common greater goal and all this stuff. That was kind of my, and besides that, there was a guy named Mark Waters that lived about 2 miles down the road. I used to walk or ride my bike down to when I was younger, before I could drive. And he trained animals for the movies. So he had tigers, lions, apes, wolves. He had like 80 wolves in these kennels. And I used to go, when you have 80 wolves, dogs, wolves, not all wolves, but dogs and wolves for the movies and stuff. When you have that many, you always need someone to just be shoveling crap and hosing out the kennels and stuff like that. So I would go do that for him in exchange for the ability to work with the exotics. Remember, he had a giant black throat monitor that I thought was the coolest thing ever. A bunch of birds like macaws and toucans and all that stuff. Did you guys see the Eddie Murphy Dr. Dolittle movie?
Oh yeah.
Remember the sick tiger? That was his tiger, Bubba, when it was a baby. That tiger was a monster later on. It was like 3 times the size it was in the movie. Thing was huge. I used to ride it as a kid.
One thing that's crazy that you just brought up and why I was smiling, it's another thing we have in common. I grew up on a horse farm, and at 15, I went to farrier school. So all this stuff you're talking about, I'm like, that's crazy that I never knew that about you, and that's what I grew up doing too.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I had 2 very different experiences, but both were like animal psychology, behavioral training background, right? So I was mostly into reptiles. I just thought they were the most interesting, and a lot of fish, but fish were too much maintenance. So I got rid of those pretty quick. But, training the exotics down at Mark Waters' place and then working with the wild horses, that's kind of where my viewpoint on how to like work with and learn from the animals really developed at an early age. So I've always kind of applied that to the animals as well, especially because nowadays you live in a day and age where, it's really pretty impressive to me that someone will ask a question, and I'm happy to help. We put out tons of educational videos and stuff like that, but we'll get somebody that, clearly has nothing to do with retics. It's like, hey, my whatever ball python I just got struck at me and now I'm afraid of it. What do I do? And it's amazing to me the amount of resources that people have, but they expect to be kind of spoon-fed the information. I was going to say it's not a bad thing. It's kind of a bad thing, but it's just a difference in the generation because when I grew up, there was no information. I learned how to keep reptiles before the internet was around, you know what I mean? Which makes us sound really old, but like I didn't even have a cell phone until I went to work for Jay Brewer and he made me because I was a sales guy. I was like, I don't want one of those stupid electronic leashes. You know what I mean? I'm a free man. So, but that was kind of my background is, having to learn from scratch. There's a lot of trial and error and stuff like that. And you would learn from other people who were in the area and you never knew what you were getting into. One of the guys that kind of was like mentoring me, if you want to call it that, he was in his young 20s when I was a teenager. I ended up getting a lot of his animals when he got arrested and went to jail because half of his stuff was illegal. He had a bunch of like stolen firearms and stuff in his apartment. That's the only reptile guy I knew. You know what I mean? So that's where we're getting our information. You guys can just go to, zoomed.com and print out a care sheet for whatever you want nowadays, It's crazy. But I sent this guy like, 5, links to videos on our channel about working with snakes that are afraid of you, training, stuff like that. And it's like, I made 5 videos about this. You could search the channel before you'd ask. It's like, I need the information from whoever is the influencer. And I'm honored to be like in that position for people. That's awesome. That is really, really cool. That's a great thing that anybody would look up to me like that. But I don't know. I think it's weird, I guess, when people, well, James, you were just saying like, oh, he's like the Superdorf guy now. You know what I mean? And what we're trying to innovate with what we do over here, preserving the different pure localities as well as kind of pushing the Superdorfs to the next level. And everyone's like, wow, how do you get into that? And it's like, I'm just chasing down the stuff that I think is underappreciated or underrepresented. It is not. I mean, show me. People ask me all the time, where can I buy a book about Superdorfs? I don't think there is one. I don't think there's. I mean, Sid James wrote a book about retics, but it's like kind of a very basic introduction. You know what I mean? There's really not a lot out there. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Dave and Tracy Barker have a little bit in their books, but it's not much.
Yeah, like the pythons of the world and all that kind of stuff. Very, very little out there. So I don't think it's so much pioneering anything. I think it's just chasing what you like that may or may not be what everyone else happens to be doing. I think there's fewer people that think that way these days.
Well, the thing about it is, Garrett, is like, as you know, as you actually read some of my comments teasing you, I do watch your stuff. And the information, that's why I don't contribute really, except for like on the length thing, is you give out really good, people need to really open their ears, because you're in it when you speak about interactions with the animals and the animal behavior, you're spot on. And there's so many people that are getting into retics that aren't learning their animals and aren't reading their animals. And that's a big thing, because retics are incredibly smart and they will bond to you and they go off of your reactions, and you give so much good information.
But you got to earn it. You got to earn it with retics.
Right.
I think that's what it attracts them to me. If I wanted something that behaved the way my little instruction manual said, I would raise a Tamagotchi or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, but if you want a live, living, breathing animal that's sharing this space with you, and it's got to be a snake. I mean, what options do you have? King cobra, maybe an indigo snake, or a retic.
Right.
I mean, those are the ones that are fun to deal with, right?
Right.
And coming back to your point with, how kind of frustrating when someone just asks you a random question like that, it's like, there is so much information out there, but there's a lot of bad information out there. I mean, you are the nice guy.
That's a fair point.
You are the nice guy that gives incredibly good information, and that there's not a person that can say a bad word about your information and how you treat people. I'm the bad guy. I just come straight out and say stuff, and because I get super frustrated. I've been educating for a very long time, but there's a lot of narrow-minded people out there that are getting into retics just to have a retic instead of learning about the retic. And when they go and they see someone like you, or they come across your channel for the first time, oh, that guy's got retics. I'm going to pop in and say and ask a question, and I need an answer right now. You have a catalog that's a mile long that you can go through, whether it's on your website or on your channel or on your Facebook page, where do a little bit of background research, a little bit. It doesn't take that much time. You don't need to have an answer right now. And if you don't give, I watch this in your live especially, if you don't give the right answer right then, and you got hundreds of questions going, they get frustrated. It's not everybody, but you'll always have that one guy that just wants to be a dick right away and then act like you're being a dick. And it's like, it's not that. You really need to pay attention.
Well, I think that there's a couple things you said. I think that is the dynamic with what goes on these days. The first one is people feel like entitled that you should contribute something to them for free. If I'm giving my time and expertise and whatever, and putting on the time to do a show like this or one of our live feeds or go to a reptile show or whatever the case may be, and someone's there yelling from the comment section listen to me, or else you're a jerk, and all that kind of stuff. That person's coming at it from a standpoint of they're not trying to contribute anything. You know what I mean? They're not even. I think you can. I mean, I'm not the tech guy. I have my team kind of handle that stuff, but you can do those super chats. What is it? Here's 99 cents, and then you can do that. They won't contribute a soft cone ice cream thing to the team for putting on these videos that they've been watching for years. You know what I'm saying? But they'll demand that you answer them. And so, yeah, there's those guys, and I mean, those people are who they are, right? But the other thing is this: I answer everybody's questions. I'm happy to answer their questions. I just wish they were asking the right question, because every now and then I get somewhere I'm like, ooh, that's a good question. I don't get asked that every day. I'll tell you what, that's such a good question. I'm going to make a whole 15-minute video about that. But it's not going to be the same question that I already answered in 5 previous videos. So if you were looking at training your snake, for example, like we talked about, or feeding your snake, or how to house your snake, or breeding your snake, or whatever it is, and you watched all my videos, and you said, okay, Garrett, now I saw where you said this about that, and so I think what I want to do is this. My question is, would that be a good idea based on what I've learned from you already? Now, all of a sudden, you can come to me and have a conversation with me about something that I'm passionate about, and you're contributing your ideas based on knowledge that you've accumulated, even if it was recently, and you're putting your own fresh spin on it. That's a conversation I enjoy having. But if someone's like, yo, hey, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, but you put your cell phone out there online, I want to know, what locality is this? I just bought it. I don't know what it is. What morph is that? You know what I mean? Like,
or
come on,
I've
answer
watched all
me
your
now.
videos. Or I've watched all your videos, and my snake still won't eat. My heat's this way. So you told me how to do this, and now it's not this. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. That's all the information you're giving me? That's literally all you're,
Yeah, and I don't know. It is hard because I got into it because there's not a lot of information out there. And the one that makes sense for me with what I'm doing in life right now is making video information. It would be great to write some stuff down that's on my to-do list. I'd like to do that, but it's out of my comfort zone. It takes a lot of time, stuff like that. I do enjoy helping these people and stuff like that. But by the same token, like, I don't know, go tap your resources. There's so much good stuff
thing
out
about
there.
It's a big responsibility, I think, well, for any animal, no matter what it is, but especially when we're talking about retics. And if a person decides that this is what they want to do, it's almost like, like you don't have any type of passion really for these animals, because you're not wanting to do any research for yourself. If you had a true passion, about these animals, or anything, any type of animal, and you're wanting to learn about them and stuff like that, you enjoy getting the research. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
we all got excited. You, me, James, if we found a reptile book in the library or whatever, and we turned a page that might have a retic on it, or found a book that actually even mentioned a retic, we got excited. We wanted to learn what that book said, or the pages said.
Fun fact, when I was in school, I remember seeing a book. It was called Crocodiles and Alligators. That's it. But it was a good book. It was a big, thick one loaded up with scientific information and pictures. I stole that book from the library. I felt really bad. I went back years later and I actually paid, because I think it was probably a $100 book or something like that. It was a good book, but still my collection, property of whatever library. I went back and made a donation later because I felt bad. I was like, well, you can't have the book back. I'll probably still read it again. But here's the money for it. Go buy yourself, or here's a new copy or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that stuff was something to cling to for sure. You had to go find out for yourself. So
I miss seeing that passion in the hobby. I really do. Before the internet came around, you used to bond with other people that had information, or going to, local events, or finding that book. I mean, you can tell the people that really, really, we're losing a lot of that in the hobby lately.
But that's how we all learned. Man, that's all we had.
I still get excited though. There's definitely people out there. So what's fun for me is, you know, you and I could have an engaging retic conversation or whatever, but it doesn't even have to be retics. I mean, if you're geeking out because you're like into newts now, you know what I'm saying? You're like, check out this Kaiser newt. You know, you're not gonna be able to get these very long or whatever, and you're super into it. That's a conversation I love to have, you know, because I just like to see somebody that's that excited about anything really, you know, that they're not following the path laid out before them, so to speak, but trying to do something new, you know. And you know, honestly, that's what I mean. I've always loved retics, chased them my whole life, but Superdor specifically. What's fun for me is that it's the only reptile I can think of. You guys can correct me. You think, see if you can think of a different example of this. But it's the only reptile that you can really breed rather than just two-dimensionally, like color and pattern or whatever. You can selectively breed for size. So you're breeding in 3 dimensions. Like, you know, what if I could make a bearded dragon 4 feet long? You know what I mean? Or a crocodile monitor that only got 12 inches. You know what I mean? American alligator that was only 18 inches long. You know, there's not a lot that you can selectively breed like that. Like there was a moment in the last video that we put up from our little Retic Fest shindig that we ended up having out here where my buddy Rob, yeah, did you see the Karompa crawling over her back? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Can you believe that scientifically those are even the same subspecies? I mean, if somebody had if you found an American alligator population that only stayed 6 inches, they would definitely name it its own thing, you know, but they haven't done it for Superdor. I mean, they're their own subspecies, some of them, the Jamps and the Slayers, but they need to go further than that. I mean, they will eventually. Science will catch up. But that's why, you know, that's another good example. It's just science isn't even there. You got to go see it for yourself. You know, I got to get out to the islands for the Superdor specifically. But, you know, you and I talked a little bit earlier there, Chip, about, you know, like I went to live in Indonesia. I lived there for over a year. So, and then I've been back several times, you know, for a month or 2 at a time or whatever beyond that. But boy, what a trip, you know, finding all that stuff, not just retics, but all the cool pet trade stuff comes from Indonesia, doesn't it? It seems like it anyway, Southeast Asia.
That's a dream right there.
Oh, it's cool. The crazy thing is all the ones you see out there that you never saw in the pet trade. And you're like, there's a snake. I got to catch it, but it might be venomous. But I got to catch it. But I don't even know about these things. Because some of the stuff that looks like totally, you know, in America, if it's venomous, it's like this big, chunky, gnarly looking thing, like a viper. You know, you got the rattlesnakes and the only exception is like the coral snakes, but those are super venomous looking too, based on colors alone. In Indonesia, you have these like little brown things that look like, you know, rough green snakes, only they're brown, but they'll kill you, you know, or whatever. They got all kinds of crazy stuff. So yeah, you gotta be a little careful out there. But boy, that was always fun herping.
I mean, people don't know about the geckos. You know, a lot of the big pet trade geckos come from that area too. You know,
tons of them.
Yeah.
Probably okay. So remember when I said I was a kid and I like catching alligator lizards? In Indonesia, it's the tokay geckos because they're everywhere and the localities are totally different. So one fun fact: if you ever go to Komodo Island, not only do the dragons get big, the tokays are gigantic.
They look like leeches.
Yes, I mean honestly, I see very few. There are a few big leeches. A lot of it seems like earlier on. When I saw leeches in the pet trade, they were bigger. A lot of them are a little shrunken now for some reason. But a lot of the tokays on like Komodo Island and stuff like that are bigger than most leeches in captivity now. Monsters.
Imagine getting bit by one of those.
Oh, I don't have to. Logged up plenty of bite time with the tokays out there. They're so cool. But yeah, I mean, just catching things like tokay geckos, you know, it's not really anything like kind of quote unquote special or whatever, but some animals are just cool animals to be around, you know, so those are really fun. And then some of the opportunities like, you know, when I left to go out there, you would occasionally see something like a fly river turtle or whatever in captivity. But if you ever did, it was thousands of dollars, you know. And I went to Indonesia and I went to like this market, they had fish and everything. And I saw a tank full of fly river turtles. They must have like dug a couple nests up and hatched them out or something because they were like fresh baby, I don't know that anyone's farming them. Maybe they do. But tons and tons of these fly river turtles. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get these. So I'm thinking, Garrett, play it cool. We're going to get a bunch of these fly river turtles. And the guys in the market are like, oh, white guy. Yeah. Okay. Play it cool. We got to rip them off, So it's like, hey, so, how much for these fly river turtles? And they're like, yeah, they're $4 a piece. You know what I mean? And they're thinking, we're going to rip him off. He's going to buy one for $4. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're $4. They'd be $4,000 in the US. So I'll buy 1,000 of them. So I didn't buy 1,000 of them, but I bought 40 fly river turtles and took them home. And I was like, these things are so cool. I had someone build me a tank the size of a jacuzzi to put them in. And man, did they grow fast. And I just had too much fun living out there. I kept spitting cobras. Those were a lot of fun.
Were you staying on Java?
Yeah, East Java, not the Jakarta side, but I actually got a gig as a college professor for English language and cross-cultural studies in a school called Universitas Merdeka. It's like Freedom University in East Java, where Malang or Batu is, and there was a school right there at the base of the Batu volcano. And so that's where I was. Yeah, it was cool because there was a small like international community, but by and large, it was mostly Indonesian people. I went the first 3 months without hearing anybody really speak English or anything. It's kind of crazy. So fun experience for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah, got to do it when you're young and dumb, because I'd love to do it again, but I can't even think about that now. But it really wasn't that hard back then. People think it's a lot harder to do that kind of stuff than it really is. I mean, plane tickets like $700. You know what I packed when I went? I got my little visa. It was like the first time I went, I got a visa in advance. You can actually just show up and they'll give you one, so you don't need to do this. But when I moved to Indonesia and I ended up living there for over a year, I was like, you know what? I'm sure they have shirts. I know they can buy T-shirts. I don't mind wearing any kind of like local shoes or whatever. It's probably better for whatever the heck activities they have out there anyways. But the one thing that I can't go without is blue jeans. So I don't wear shorts. I got to have blue jeans. And I don't know if I could find any blue jeans while I was out there. So I got like a 98-pound duffel bag, 2 pounds under the limit, full of blue jeans. And I moved out there and they stopped me in customs and they're like, you're peddling these knockoff blue jeans. And I was like, no, I swear, those are for personal use. Why would one person need so many blue jeans? I was like, I don't know how long I'm going to live here. I don't want to run out of blue jeans. You know what I mean? I go through pants quick. I don't know if I can buy my size out here. Everyone's half as tall as me, and I'm not tall. So yeah, I don't know. Stupid fun adventures. It was pretty cool though. That's for sure.
Yeah, you're one of probably only 4 U.S. people reptile people that I know that have actually been over there.
Oh, there's got to be more than that. Maybe it's because I have been there and you hear stories from people and stuff like that. But
well, actually, let's say retic people. 1 of 4 retic people. We'll go that way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it was pretty cool. We were able to find a lot of stuff and things like that. We had a lot of fun. There's a joke, like best retic herping that I found, because reticulated pythons are pretty tough to find in the wild. They're not a consistent thing in most places, because they'll usually be like either the big ones you'll find like crossing a little path at night, but you're in the middle of the jungle. There's tons of it there. So it's not like there's not really any reason for them to be on the path. It's not like night cruising in the US where the pavement's warm and so they all go there or something like that. It's just miles and miles of jungle and one little path, and occasionally you'll find one moving across it. Or you'll see them in the trees. If you can get somebody to take you somewhere in a canoe and you can go down, find a lot of little reptiles, small retics included, kind of hanging in the trees over the water sometimes. But the only consistent place that I found, I was actually going to Komodo Island. And when you go to Komodo, you don't fly to the island. Like there's no cars or airport or anything on Komodo Island. It's too small. So they fly you to the next big island over to a town called Labuan Bajo. And up the road from Labuan Bajo, there was a place that I heard of when I was staying and waiting to get across to the island. One of the guides, I was like, yeah, any cool reptile stuff to do? And they're like, oh, you should check out, we call it Istana Ular. It means the palace of snakes. Yeah, you should check it out. It's this big cave full of snakes. I was like, snakes? What kind of snakes? And they're like, oh, the big ones, the retics. And I was like, no way, that's cool. They go, yeah, if you go deep enough, there's a white one, big white one that lives way back in the cave. And I'm like, let's go. You know what I mean? And I don't know if the white one really lives there, or what. I don't know if it's a calico or an albino or something. Probably a calico, because that's what they find most often out there. But I'm like, I'm gonna go all the way to the back of this cave and get it. What you don't realize is, like, when you get in there, you get like 50 feet in and you can't breathe anymore.
Ammonia.
You're dying. Yeah. Oh, it's gross. And you're like up to your waist in guano. It's like a river of bat poop that comes out with snakes swimming through it. And then they have all the walls of the caves and everything are like, they look like shelves. Like, I'm always preaching, put a shelf in your retic cage, give them something to climb up on. It's because they're always tucking themselves in these little shelves up there in the caves. And then they pick off these fruit bats as they come in and out, and it's funny, the fruit bats are like exactly the size of a colossal rat, perfect prey size. So yeah, so they just hang out. That's the only place where you can consistently find, like, fairly large retics, for like the 8 foot and up, stuff like that. So yeah,
but that's another thing I preach, because I talk to a lot of people in Indonesia, thanks to Facebook and everything. I've made some friends over there, and you see on these big groups, everybody's always asking, oh, what should I do with my retic cage? What humidity? What temperature should I keep it? What should I do here? I'm like, I always tell people, listen, you know where that animal comes from. Go research the climate, the pressure, the humidity, the daytime, the nighttime, the seasonal. Mimic that, and the retic will be happy. And then I always hear, oh, these are captive breds, not wild caught. I'm like, mimic it, whether it's been in captivity for 5 days or its whole life. Yeah, exactly. And nobody wants to hear that. Everybody wants to hear, I've got my Herpstat 5 and you got to have a 90-degree hot spot and it's got to be over here, one side. It's like, mimic where they're from and they'll be happy.
The sad thing about it is, Chip, is that you said where these animals come from, but there's a lot of people that don't know where these animals come from.
Well, especially if you like, so one of the most popular species is ball pythons. It's always fun to ask people, what locality ball pythons do you have? And they're like, haha, I'm just joking. But seriously, what country do they come from? Nobody knows. You're lucky if they say Africa. What I mean? So
I mean, Pogo, Benin, Ghana, which continent are this from? Nobody knows that there's other countries that they come from.
25% of people say they come from South America. So, but
yeah, but anyway, back to you. That's what I'm talking about. This is great information. And I guarantee you there is a lot of, maybe you reach out reptiles people, if they've watched you enough, they've seen this. But there's so many people like in Retic Nation or Retic Worldwide or Retic Connection that know who you are, but don't know these experiences that you've had, that you've been to where these animals live. This is the type of stuff that I want the people that watch this to hear, to get to know you a little better, So you've been to Indonesia. After you come back and you've seen these retics in the wild, when do you start keeping retics again when you come back?
I've always had reptile. I mean, I've had times in my life where I had to get rid of them and then get them back again. But more often times than not, I was buying back my own pets from other people, because you get rid of 10 animals. You're like, I really want those 6 back. You know what I mean? The other 4 can go, whatever, but those 6 I want back. So I would keep doing it again. So yeah, after I got back, let me think. Right when I got back from Indonesia, I believe I moved up to some mountains in Southern California. I was living up at a campsite, which worked out pretty well, because there was like Boy Scouts groups and Christian camp groups and stuff like that would come up during the summer. And I ended up teaching outdoor science school. And so I would be like, you guys probably remember when you're in 4th grade, 5th grade, whatever. You go up to camp for a week and they like hike and they teach all the little plants and animals and stuff like that are out there. So I would hike these students all around Southern California and teach them, the plants and animal life and stuff like that. And so having a large collection of reptiles came in really handy, because we would sit down and we'd talk about things like, okay, is it a herbivore or a carnivore or whatever? We'd be like, let's check the teeth on these ones, oh, here. You know what I mean? And always like to do something pretty entertaining. Like I used to freak the kids out. This is probably a little bit much for today's kids, but back then I'd be like, well, it's really hard to check the teeth of a snake, so there's one way to do it. And so I'd take one of my snakes out and let it bite me, and I'd be like, okay, now let's look. All right, see the teeth here? You can see all the little holes in there. I was like, oh, and then I'm like, nah, it's fine. They're cool. Like, don't worry about it. And then I'd take out a friendly one and be like, who wants to hold a snake? And everyone's like, oh, not me. And then but it was a teachable moment because I could say, all right, well, so that other animal I took out, that's a wild animal. You know what I mean? He and I, like we have a working relationship, but I crossed the line there. I did it on purpose to show you guys that his bite is harmless. He's not venomous. This other snake, though, is different, and so just like you shouldn't judge people as soon as you look at them, maybe think a thing or two about snakes. People might say all snakes are evil or whatever, but let me show you a different snake. And then I'd pull something out that was cuter looking, or, something like an albino, anything, is so artificial looking. I think that it calms people down a lot more, especially if you could get something like, and here's where the ball python, we were making fun of people that have ball pythons or whatever, but ball pythons are the best thing that ever happened to the snake industry. They're like the snake for people who are afraid of snakes. So it brings new people in because they're cute. You can get a pink one, you know what I mean, or whatever. And they've got round faces and round eyes, and they don't look aggressive in any way. They're kind of fat and lazy. They look like an English bulldog, you know what I mean? But they're snakes. So you pull something like that out, and people are amazed. You can pass them all around for hours and stuff like that. So I lived up at that camp for a long time. I got back into breeding retics, but the thing with breeding consistently is that the animals need a pretty stable environment. And I was moving around. It was like every 2-3 years I'd move again back then. So I didn't do as much breeding back then, but I had bred retics going way back. So even most people that know me in the industry, like you guys met me when I worked at Prehistoric Pets, which was a while ago. It was over 10 years ago now, but I only worked there for a couple of years. Right. And I had already been breeding retics and everything before that point. That's why I was able to move in and kind of hit the ground running, working there, because I'd done other business stuff, sales, development stuff. I've always been some kind of sales and marketing, not because I went to school for it. I actually didn't go to college. I always joke around, the only college classroom I've been in, I was a professor when I was out in Indonesia, and stuff like that. I just learned all this stuff, whatever, school of hard knocks, however you want to put it. But yeah, between my sales and marketing background and then my passion for the animals, I had, back to the horses, I ended up getting into, back with Prehistoric because I had a bunch of big wild caught mainland retics, all different localities, the stuff I loved, probably not practicable for most people, but for me, they were perfect. It was a perfect animal for me. And I had a bunch of that kind of stuff. I always like big stuff, venomous stuff, things that give me a little bit of a rush. And then, on the side, I'm working with horses or doing whatever I'm doing, backpacking and bouldering and all this stuff, beating myself up a lot. It's kind of an adrenaline junkie, getting into a lot of extreme sports all the time and things like that. And the third time I broke my back with horses, I had got kicked in the stomach and it broke my spine in 3 places by a mom that had a little foal. And that's when I decided it's time to retire from the dangerous animals like horses and just work with stuff like, retics and alligators and things like that don't really mess you up too much. The stuff that people are afraid of but are actually relatively harmless, And that's what people don't understand. Yeah, and even the YouTube culture doesn't really portray that. People are like, oh my gosh, giant python, whoa, almost got me. And I don't blame those guys because it's the only way to get anybody to sit down and pay attention these days. To have a giant snake strike at their face, right at the camera, bah! You know what I mean? And people are like, okay, I'm watching. But if you're like, hey, let me teach you about this cool animal, everyone's like, that's boring. Make it bite you. That'll be fun. And it's like the little kids at the camp again or whatever, make them pay attention. You got to get bit by a snake or something. So it's unfortunate. But I broke my back with horses again at that point. And then I actually took a lot of my bigger retics with me to Prehistoric Pets. And I sold them through their pet shop. and kind of whittled down my collection. And it wasn't because I didn't love the animals, and really I probably could have worked for them, but my back was just messed up. And you guys know this. I mean, when you have a big snake, I mean, like cleaning day, you got just say half a dozen big retics, you're shot at the end of that. When your snakes are over 100 pounds and like 8 feet of them curls out in front of you, and that's 70 pounds right there, and then it goes hard left, and you're like, oh, you know, and they're twisting you all around, and you've broken your back 3 times and all this stuff. It's not fun. You know what I mean? They'll mess you up. You know, you're sore the next day. Even if you're healthy, you know, it'll wear you out. But yeah, so that kind of forced me to retire from it. And I got into a bunch of lizards and stuff like that. I bred a lot of the Odiatra, like the dwarf monitors from Australia and things. I really love those. Those are cool. And I kind of did the shotgun approach thing, grabbed a bunch of different things. But I'm telling you guys, I mean, I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but every time I had an animal that wasn't a retic, I was like, you know, I could put a retic in that cage though. That would be so much cooler, you know.
That's strange.
But
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's true. They're just, I don't know. They're just so much more interesting to keep. And the fact that we don't still know a lot about them, and that there is so much to do with them, whether it's preserving some of these localities that traditionally were imported and sold in the pet trade in the US, but nobody cared to establish them, you know, or creating new morphs, you know, or like I said, trying to breed for that third dimension of size or whatever it is. There's so much more to do with the animals, you know. And the other side of it too is that I think it's a conversation that we have to have as retic keepers. We don't like to talk about it like openly too much or something, but something you need to understand is that a mainland reticulated python is not for everybody, even a captive bred one.
Right.
They're
yeah.
big,
100%.
big animals, potentially dangerous animals if you're an idiot. You know what I mean? So don't be
100%.
an idiot and get those. Yeah, I mean there are things. So you got to pay attention to that. And then, you know, here's the thing: I have sold thousands, I'll say tens of thousands of mainland reticulated pythons. You know, and we as people, I think we assume other people are going to be like us, right? So if you're an honest person, you count on other people to be honest, and then when they're dishonest, it's this huge betrayal, and you're like, how could you be that way? And some other dishonest friend of yours would be like, yeah, you idiot. Well, how'd you not think that was going to happen? Of course he's going to rip you off. You left your wallet out in the open. You're like, yeah, but it was my wallet. I wouldn't take somebody else's wallet. They need that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we think that people are going to be like us. Well, if I had a giant retic or whatever, and I didn't have a good cage for it, I'd go out and buy a bunch of stuff and build one. You know, I mean, when we were in the 90s, we used to give whole rooms to these things. When I was a kid, my version of a small cage was a full-size bed that was like a bunk bed that I enclosed and made the cage out of the bottom. I was like, yeah, that's small, but that'll do for now. You know, nowadays people are like, let's take a room and stuff them all in there and we'll do this kind of stuff. And some of us get better at keeping to where you can kind of like find efficiencies and things. But at a certain point, you're pushing it with the animal. Everything has to be exactly right or you're going to mess them up. And so I think people that are getting the biggest snake that they can and saying, what's the minimum required amount to take care of this? They got the wrong mindset from the get-go.
That's what we preach here. We do. We preach that big time.
Sure. So I mean, my idea is basically like with the super dwarfs, I see it a little bit as my penance because I've sold tens of thousands of these things in a short period of time whenever I worked at Prehistoric because they produced so many of them. And I was so good at getting people excited about these things and buying them that a year, 2 years later, they didn't want them anymore. They'd be dumping them in rescues, giving them back, finding them. You know, I remember seeing news stories around Fountain Valley or Huntington Beach, California, giant snake found in the parking lot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember that snake. I sold that to a guy like 6 months ago. You know what I mean? Now it's 8 feet long and it's cruising in some, you know, strip mall parking lot or whatever because someone released it or they found it in a dumpster or whatever. And, you know, you try to do a good job vetting people, but you sell tens of thousands of retics, and I'm sorry, a large portion of those are not going to good homes. They're just not. There's not tens of thousands of good homes for a mainland retic. You know, there could be. They're not a difficult snake. They're just a lot of snake, and you got to be prepared for that.
Yeah, how many adult mainlands do you see that are over 8 years old?
Oh, very few. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And how many animals are out there? Well, it's because exactly your point. People have the mindset, they get a mainland retic that's going to get big, and they want to do the bare minimum. That, no matter what anybody says, that's going to shorten their lifespan. They're relatively easy snakes to keep if you keep them right.
They're very easy. They're very easy to keep. They're super forgiving of all kinds of stuff, and they're very rewarding to keep. And everybody that has retics, they have that positive experience for like 12 months, 18 months. And then on the tail end of that, they're like, well, I had to get rid of it. And I don't really think it's a big thing because they took care of the retic. They think the next person can take care of the retic. But every time that thing passes hands and every time its value went down, well, I bought it for 500, but I'll give it to you for 300. Well, I bought it for 300, but I like to just get $100 back. You know what I mean? Off of it, that, you know, not that price directly correlates, but humans are wired to, you know, it's painful for me to give up money. So the more money I give up, the more I appreciate whatever it is that I got. But if you give me something for free, I'm just never going to appreciate it as much as what I had to pay for. It's like the information we're talking about, hard-earned information for us that we appreciated. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, these people are entitled to free information because they grew up with it. You know, so my penance with the retics was I figure my animals will have a much, much better chance of finding good homes if they were a smaller snake. And a lot, you know, in the beginning, a lot of the retic guys were like, wow, super dwarfs. Why would you want that? If you want a retic, get a retic. If you want a small snake, just go get some stupid ball python or a corn snake or something. And I'm always like, are you serious? Like, that's all you like about your retics is that they're big? That seems pretty shallow. I find that hard to believe because there's Burmese pythons and there's anacondas and there's all the boas and they're not, you know, big scrubs, afrocs, but you got 50 retics, maybe one of each of those others. Why is that? Just because they're big? I don't think so. I think there's a lot of cool things you like about that snake, and it is impressive to have a giant snake and be able to interact with it. Just like it was impressive for me to ride that tiger that was in that movie when I was a kid. That was like, holy crap. But the truth of the matter is people, you know, not as many people are equipped to handle a full-grown tiger, just like they are with a retic, you know? Yeah. So there are people who are, and that's fantastic because those of us who are willing to put in the time and the effort, I really feel like legislation and stuff needs to step off and allow that to happen. But we have to be smart enough of our own. So you're talking about like getting along with people. I think the reason why a lot of people jump down each other's throats in this industry is because we care so much. And we're like, oh, don't do that wrong. The animal's going to suffer if you don't consider the consequences of what you're doing. And we care so much about the animals. We end up calling each other idiots and stuff like that online because we see someone doing something different than us. And we get into arguments and our egos get involved. And then we're like, nah, I hate that guy. He called me wrong one time. You know what I mean? And how did he learn anything? You know, and that, I mean, it's the same argument. You just fill in everybody, when I talk like that, everyone's like, yeah, you're talking about an argument I had last week. I don't know what you guys are talking about. I don't pay attention to it. But those are the arguments we all have. Yeah. And I think it comes from a good place. We do care about the animals. So the trick is the new person that's considering buying that snake, how do you make them really consider it? You know, really think it through, like, because I would love for more people to have big retics and be able to bring that kind of like majestic, giant, impressive animal in front of other people where they can see it, touch it, interact with it, learn from it, you know, long into the future.
Absolutely.
But because so many of us are like, oh, it was just pretty and it was $100 and that's how much I had in my pocket at the reptile show. I had to take it home. I went there to get a crested gecko, but I went home with a retic instead because, wow, it was so nice as a baby. But if I can get something that's like that Karompa that you saw in the video, that's the size of a bull snake but with all of the intelligence and interactivity and amazing things that make retics what they are, and I can breed them down. Well, now I can get you a snake if you want one that's 18 foot, 13 foot. I don't do anything much over 12 or 13 feet anymore because that's just a big snake, right? But I can get you something that's going to get about 13 foot, maybe 10 foot. If you need one that's 8 foot, or if you need to go super, super, super small, I can get you like a pure little super dwarf male that's going to get under 8 foot, maybe 6, 7 foot. And I can provide that. So it's like, hey, we all love retics. They're great. What kind of person are you? What sort of enclosure are you willing to put this animal into? What kind of budget do you have to spend on this animal? And a lot of things just came together, right? Like the localities are rare, and it's easy to make a retic big. It's hard to keep it small. And right. I'm not talking about, please don't think I'm talking about like maintenance feeding or anything like that. I'm talking about genetically, right? There are far more bigger snakes, say 10 foot and over, than smaller retics. Right. Under 10 foot for a retic is pretty difficult to achieve. It takes a lot of
genetics work in both ways.
Yeah, sure. So, so those animals end up being more expensive. So they're smaller. They're easier to take care of. People tend to appreciate them more. They also have a higher resale value if you want to get into a breeding project. And they're wonderfully enabling because I love buying new retics. I bought a new one last week. We put her in there. She's terrible. Nasty big slayer. I'm sure I'll put some videos up because I want to do some like how to train my new snake with my new big slayer. She's like 11 foot or something like that. And we'll have some fun with that, just like the good old days or whatever. But because I can have these smaller ones and they have smaller space requirements and everything else, I can have more of them. So I can breed more of them. There's more people that are trying to buy them. I think it was Eugene Bassett, is one of the greats, the old school guys who always said, very simply, big snake, small market, small snake, big market. And there's nothing wrong with having a small market because you like big snakes. You just have to understand that you're not going to have the same kind of thing as everybody else. You can't get jealous of the guy who's like, oh man, that guy put all his ball pythons up on Morph Market and people are just buying them and no one's interested in mine. And it seems like I'm always, you guys are retic guys, right? So you kind of know this. It's not 100% true, but it's kind of true. All of our best stuff, we kind of just trade with each other, don't we? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you got one of those. Let me get one of those. I'll trade you for these of mine. You know what I mean? And you're just trading all the time. It's a small community, which is a great thing. We're always very supportive of each other. You can go on the retic forums and someone hatches some cool new thing and everyone's like, holy crap, it makes me blow my mind. Great job, man. That's so awesome. And you see a lot of that. And we trade them back and forth, but there are fewer people getting into it. You know what I mean? And if we're honest with each other, that's probably the way that it should be. I would love for everyone to be capable and take care of a big retic, but who are we kidding? I mean, I would say less than half of Americans should have a golden retriever. You know what I'm saying? It's just not there, guys. Right. You know what I'm saying? Let alone.
Yep.
Everyone should be able to have a retic, but not everyone needs a retic.
Yeah, no, I agree, 100%. Yeah, we should be allowed to have this stuff, but it's so stupid that you should have to. We talk too much about like legalities and stuff because it's a big issue facing our industry today, which I hate. Because I don't care about that stuff. I hate that crap. You know what I mean? It just makes me angry. Just step off, guys. Let me do my thing as long as I'm doing it well. You shouldn't have to have a law like, hey, if you have an animal, you should take care of it. What a dumb law. It's a good law because you should take care of an animal if you have it. But why would you ever have to make a law about that? Come on, what are we, people? Why would anyone get an animal, pretend to love it, and abuse it instead? That's just what's wrong with you when you buy that animal. What are you thinking? I don't understand it to this day. I try to encourage people to think a little bit more because I know that you can get things impulsively, and that's how a lot of people get into retics, or they got bad information. Like, you guys may not agree with this. I don't know. We don't talk.
We'll see. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, so fire back at any moment you want. But like, I can't stand the old mentality of, no, just go ahead and get a retic. It'll never get big if you don't feed it very much. You can keep it super small by not feeding it. To me, that sounds exactly like the 1970s carny guy giving you a baby alligator saying it'll never outgrow a 10-gallon tank if you never put in anything bigger. And the funny thing is, it's true.
Well, you know how many alligators I have that are stunted because I have so many because in Minnesota, they sell alligators in pet shops all over the place. Because there's guys that will buy bull hatchlings right at the season from the farms, sell them for $100.
Oh, they're cheap and they're so cute. And you're definitely the only kid on the block to have one when you buy them.
And then they buy them and they put them in a 20-gallon tank or a dog kennel, stunt the crap out of them. They have metabolic bone disease because they're getting fed dog food or whatever. And then they get dumped. I literally have 5 alligators. I have a 19-year-old alligator right now that's 5 years old with its teeth that are pointing all this way because of that mentality.
But it's the same thing as if I had a human child and someone says, if you never let it out of its crib, it'll never outgrow it. And that's probably true. Probably true. I don't think that kid's going to be in very good condition by the time he's 3 or 4 years old, but he'll probably never live long enough to outgrow his crib if you never let him out of it. You know, and so, like, it just, I can't stand that kind of stuff. On the other hand, you'll hear people say things like, you can't overfeed a retic. It's impossible to overfeed a retic. And I'm like, okay, guys, I understand, like, they have the capability of taking down big meals, and they have relatively quick metabolisms compared to other large animals. But you can't say you can't overfeed anything. Anything will get fat, especially in the hands of American pet owners. My God. I mean, you know, like heart disease and all that kind of stuff in America, because we chunky boys. We like to eat. We like our dogs and snakes and everything else that way too. All our dogs have higher heart rate, you know, heart disease problems and stuff than they do in other countries. You know, don't tell me you can't overfeed something.
That's another reason why you don't see a 20-year-old retic, because that mentality was for a while, and there's so much heart disease and fatty liver disease because these retics were pounded and got real big and then got chunky, and they never reached 30 years old because, I mean, I'm not going to, you'll know the snake I'm talking about, but the snake died at not even 15 years old and was considered the largest albino snake ever. And I remember the day that animal was hatched in Iowa, and it ended up being one of the largest snakes in the U.S. ever. And it died because it was fat. No matter what, I talked to the owner and openly admitted over the phone with me, but was never said in public.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and the funny thing to me is that a lot of the retics that I see, we're talking about experience gained from real world, living in Indonesia. Even if a retic is slim, those suckers are yoked. They are so strong, but it's like a sinewy strength. They're like a marathon runner, they're all like sinews and skinny, and they flex, and you can see like all these lines rippling down their body where all these muscles are, zero fat. You know what I mean? You might catch a glimpse of some ribs every now and then, but even the ones that live in the prime conditions, like in those bat caves or whatever, they're thick. You know what I mean? You get your hands on them, you're like, ooh, like nice, squishy, chunky, sexy snake. You know what I'm saying? Zero fat on those suckers, though. I mean, they are athletic, they are strong, and they climbing up and down stuff constantly. And they're not arboreal like a emerald tree boa, where they're going to sit and perch in things forever, though they do that. But that's not the way they live. The way they're arboreal is they're like always gliding over things. They're arboreal more like a mamba. You ever see a mamba go through the trees? They're just like touching and skimming through things. So I always get criticized when I say super dwarves are even more arboreal than a lot of mainlands. Everyone's like, no, they're not. It's not like there's giant canopies of trees there. I'm like, I didn't say they live like over 75-foot elevation from the ground. They're just never on flat surfaces. If you look at the islands, it's nothing but like coral reef rocks and a bunch of brush and garbage. And then if you get down to the edge, there's mangrove trees. And they're cruising through roots. Mangrove roots go out and down like this. They're cruising through the roots, and then they go up to the trees. It's like a quick jump, maybe 5-6 feet up a trunk. You ever see them climb up those vertical trunks?
Yep.
Oh my goodness, is it impressive. I've seen retics chase down monkeys in trees. I'd like to see anybody's captive retic do that. They just can't. You know what I mean? So a lot of the retics are not necessarily like obese fat, like some of these monsters are that people really overfeed, but they're like a skinny fat, like a flabby fat. You know what I mean? Where they don't have enough muscle. They definitely have fat on them. And when it gets tucked in around their guts and stuff, that's when you're shortening lifespan. But a lot of retics are too skinny fat.
If nobody, and that's most people now that have retics have never handled fresh wild caught retics. Me, James, you have, and you've handled wild ones in the wild. There is such a difference in feel. It is night and day from a captive 10-foot animal to a fresh wild caught 10-foot animal. It's night and day.
Yeah. But, you know, all the reptiles are that way, which is funny when people sit down and they're like, I know everything about reptiles. I always feel like, guys, we've got so much to learn. There is so much space for people to get into this hobby, find their little niche with whatever species. It could be retic, it could be ball pythons or whatever. Like, if we just had everything that there is to know about ball pythons, wouldn't you love to see like actual studies? And when's the last time someone did a documentary on ball pythons in the wild? I would love to watch that. It would be so educational. You know what I'm saying? But we just don't have that stuff. So it's funny to me, like first time I went to Komodo Island, I've been there 7 different times now. The first time I went, I'd never seen the wild Komodos, but I'd spent plenty of time with Komodos around them, like in the zoos and stuff like that. I had even had some friends that were out there in Indonesia that had kind of like private zoo, whatever, where they got a bunch of Komodos and things like that. It always makes me laugh when people go, oh, there's no Komodos in captivity in Indonesia, or they're, you know, this is the only zoo to have them. And I go to Indonesia, every zoo's got like 270 Komodos, like just laying all over the place. It's crazy. They look like green iguanas at a golf resort in Florida or something. You know, it's crazy. Like, I probably shouldn't say that. It's political. But to pretend like there's no green iguanas in Florida right now.
Right.
To current political climate. But I mean, they're all over the place, right? So I'd played with them. I put hands on them. I'd even caught some big water monitors in the wild, like big ones, like 6+ foot. You know, grab them, wrestle them around. They're like, and you're like, almost getting bit. You know, like that's a lot of lizard to grab. So when I was young and dumb, the first time I went to Komodo, I was like telling all my friends, I was like, I just want to feel the power. And I know you're not allowed to. And this is totally like not kosher. So nobody follow my example this way because it's really stupid. But I was like, I just want to jump on one for a second, like I would with a big alligator or something. Just jump on their back, grab a hold of their shoulders, let them thrash around, and then like run away real quick before I get all tore up or something. I was like, that's what I'm going to do. That's my number one goal when I go to Komodo. I got to Komodo dragon. I saw those wild things. Oh my gosh, you guys, like the ones you see in zoos, they're like giant salamanders. These ones that are in the wild, they're like their biceps are the size of my thigh. They've got these huge pecs. They stand up real big like this. And then I had one like run up to me. They're actually filming a nature documentary on the island when I was there the first time. And they're tease feeding them these fish and dragging them with strings across the place and stuff like they always do, but they don't tell you on these documentaries, of course. So these things are like whipped up into a feeding frenzy, basically. And it like charges right up to me and like stops, 12 inches in front of my face. And then it goes, and it just breathes out. And it was like these huge nostrils. And the first thing I thought, I was like, holy crap, I just had a flashback to those wild horses that I worked with. These are monstrous animals. Like, these things are so big and so strong. And, like crocodiles are giant and incredibly and strong and stuff too. But they're pretty limited in what they can do.
Oh, yeah, they're physically. Not that agile.
Komodo dragons are like this way, that way, back over, twisted, run around, chase you up a tree, swim at you through the river, run faster than you on land. They're just crazy animals. These things are freaking jacked in the wild because they're having to wrestle down deer and pig and, stuff like they're just crazy, and each other, Oh, my gosh. Anyway, little side rant there. But, yeah, wild animals, nothing like what we have in captivity. 1,000 times more impressive. It would be 10 times more impressive to put your hands on a really well-kept 12-foot retic, let's say, it was like just jacked, ripped, no fat on it, really well built, super confident, the kind of animal that cruises right up and looks you in the face, and you're like, sure, maybe I'm just gonna back down a minute here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna freak out, but I'm just gonna give you your space. There's something respectable about the way that you're coming at me right now, versus having an 18-foot slug. You know what I'm saying? It's just not the same thing. So that's where I think we need to get as a hobby, like just really keeping them well. And I am starting to see some people trying some different things, and they take a lot of flack for it and stuff. But I would say if you're trying to keep them more like the animals in the wild than you are like whoever you saw on YouTube or whatever commercial breeder provided your animals for you and whatnot, you're probably heading in the right direction.
100%. I agree. And I know exactly what you're talking about with the guy that caught a lot of flack for that. Now, you know, those people, it boggled my mind. I could not believe I saw negative comments on there. I'm like, how could you think any of what that guy spent so much money for that, to build that enclosure and that type of habitat.
I don't know who you're talking about. I'm not shy though. You're talking about somebody that built like a giant jungle enclosure to put the retics in, caught flack for it.
Yeah,
because it's not one person. I've seen that a lot of times. Yeah.
Well, there's one recently that's actually up that it looks so amazing, and he's got one large, probably right around 16, 17 foot retic in there, and he brought in a full tree, you know, everything in this, and he spent so much money, and it looks amazing. And he can stand up in there and walk around and not touch anything just for this one snake. And people are telling him he went overboard. And why would you do that?
I don't think you can go that's like somebody has a hot rod car that was owned by their grandfather, and they restored it and it cost them however much money, and you said they went overboard. You can't, that's not yours to say. That's right. What that person loves and enjoys. You can't go overboard on taking good care of your animal. Right. But what I think does happen is that people say, like, okay, because I have my animal in a little box, you know what I'm saying, that's the right way to do it. Because if it's the wrong way, that means I have to change, and we don't like to change, right? And so if you say, hey, you should have, let's say you have a 10 by 10 room that's 8 foot tall, and you're going to put one retic in there and say, this is the right way to keep a retic, then everybody that has a 10 by 10 room with 30 retics in there is going to freak out, because they're going to be like, whoa, I got 30 retics and I don't have the money for 30 rooms. So don't tell me that's the wrong way to do it. I'm going to get defensive right now, because otherwise I have to change, you know? And I would say, I mean, the first time I went to Komodo, I tried to jump on a wild one. You know what I mean? I used to teach kids by getting bit by snakes in front of them. The first snake I bred was a rattlesnake. And guys, I bred that in a cardboard box under my bed because I was hiding it from my mom. The first snapping turtle I had, I kept in my shower. You know what I'm saying? I did not do anything right the right way for a very, very long time in a large portion of my life. But here's the difference. I never lived in denial. Eventually, my snapping turtle was moved into, I got a 20-foot round, like big pond for it that I was able to put in the backyard. And then when I felt like I couldn't get that pond acting right and being right for that turtle, and I always hated that he had nowhere to like pull out even if he wanted to, even though they don't really do that much or whatever. But I ended up giving it to a guy that had a giant natural pond. It was like a half-acre natural pond that he had other turtles in and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And so that animal was upgraded throughout his life. You know what I mean? That the animals that that I used to get bit by or whatever, all that kind of stuff, I started to notice that there are some animals that they're biting me because they're terrified. And there's other animals that are just like, that's kind of my thing. I like to bite you. You know what I mean? Whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, we can talk in like a mature way about this. There are some people who do those kinds of things, and they're actually like exploiting or abusing the animal. And because it happens so much that everyone freaks out that anytime someone gets bit by a snake, it's, oh, poor animal. And you're like, hold on, that snake just bit me. Like, I was being nice to him and he bit me. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a difference. There is a difference. And people who've been around the animal, I'm not saying that should be a regular part of keeping by any means, but not everybody that got bit by a snake is abusing an animal, for God's sakes. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Oh, yeah.
So I think the point is that we're always should be trying to get better, improve our methods. If you go walk through my snake room right now, I'm at the peak of our like inventory. I'm completely maxed out. This little room that I'm in right here, it's this tiny little, we're talking about the 10 by 10 room. I think this office area that I'm sitting in is, I did that Retix Fest. Everyone's like, I can't believe how small it is in real life around here. And I was like, yeah, that's what everyone says. But I can almost touch the walls this way and this way in this room. So I think it's something like 8 by 10 foot or something. I got 4 employees that work in this space. You know what I'm saying? We're just absolutely maxed out. So the way I want to keep retics, some of them are set up quite nicely. You know what I mean? But not all of them. I would like to upgrade the cage size for a lot of those guys. I would like to, and that's something that we are working towards. And, and a big challenge for me, if you have one retic, you can't go overboard. Oh my gosh, just build it a jungle and go live in with it. I always thought it'd be cool to recreate Istana Ular, like a bat cave scenario with multiple big retics in it, just like I found them in the wild. I even think it would be cool to like gut load rodents with like papaya and stuff that those bats are eating, because there's probably all kinds of vitamins in there that they're getting that they do not get on Missouri rodent chow or whatever. You know what I mean? That they're feeding the rats here in captivity. So I always think it's cool to do that kind of stuff, but I still have to keep and breed the animals, and it's not an excuse for giving them like substandard conditions. But what I would really like to find is, where is that sweet spot where you can keep a number of animals reasonably well? Like if you do studies on mainland retics in the wild, I was talking with a friend of mine, and they were bringing up to me that they had put trackers on retics, and they covered like a 24 square mile range. Can you believe that? A retic that we traditionally think of as like a sit and wait predator or something that just lives in one place and eats, and that's it. 24 square miles. Nobody gives us retic a 24 square mile cage. You know what I'm saying? It's not practical. But I think you could have a big walk-in jungle room or whatever. That's a really good way to keep them in captivity. It's kind of like we can give our dogs raw food diets, but we're not letting them hunt caribou. You know what I mean? There's a way where you can like, well, how can I get a lot of the benefit out of this? Maybe I can do some obedience training with it, get him on a frisbee so he's getting exercise, give him a raw food diet. Now my dog is a captive animal, domesticated animal that has a very good natural lifestyle. He never hunted a caribou in his life, because he's a wolf or whatever. So what I would love to see is, especially with, like I said, the third dimension in breeding with the retics, the size, can we truly, domesticate these guys? I don't think there's any reason why we can't. We've domesticated everybody else. You know what I mean? Don't give me that whole reptiles are wild animals forever and ever. I don't believe that. I think that quite a few species are getting very close to being domesticated.
I have an animal here that was from the wild that is literally my nicest animal that I own, and seems like whenever I have it out, it interacts with me all the time. I can see it watching me. It'll come up to me. It'll sit on my leg. It'll move around. It's very an interactive animal. I don't think people appreciate how smart these animals truly are and how much they comprehend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Those wild ones, like we said earlier, those guys are on point because, they've had such a breadth of experience in their life. What I would love is a captive, bred, born, and raised animal to end up being that on point as an adult because it spent its life with me. That's where I would be really proud, because I've done a great job with my captive husbandry at that point. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I want to know what you guys, I'm going to interview you for a second. What is your guys' favorite projects that you guys are working with for each one of you guys right now? Like, what's the most exciting thing going on in your collections today?
Go ahead, James.
That's for me. That's hard. Um, um, because there for a while it was the anthrax. We were always known for our anthrax stuff and everything, and losing all that. Um,
When you say we, are you going back to like the reed ticks back then?
right. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
all the
that
anthrax
was
stuff
pretty.
was mine.
Oh yeah, I
And
understood. Right.
and accident happened and we lost all the animals. So starting all over and everything. Um, I have a lot of stuff from Aubrey. So I'm really into the ocelot project. Um, but I'm
That's kind of
hoping.
a similar thing to anthrax. It's not quite the same, but like one of those like recessive pattern mutation, looks very different depending on what bloodline or how you selectively breed it. Just
Yeah,
like the anthrax, right? A lot of variety in
right,
there.
and that's where I'm at. Because there's other people because it's been out for a while, so you have other people that are working with it. So I'm wanting to try to keep it as clean and nice and as possible. With selective breedings and stuff, not just trying to make visual animals and whatnot. Kind
Trying to
of like
make the
what we
right
did,
visual animals.
like what we did with the anthrax stuff. Um,
Yeah.
Everybody knew that where when they saw our anthrax stuff, they knew where they came from. Um,
But that's why I was calling it like reed ticks. It actually became its own adjective. Your guys' head anthrax looked a lot better than other people's visual anthrax in a lot of times, just because there's so much selective breeding for that look that got into it. You guys had head anthrax that were like speckled head to toe. You
right.
know
Yeah,
what I
people
mean?
don't. James doesn't get the recognition like Reed does, even though it was James's animals.
Um,
Well, I mean, you always had Jampless over there, so
um,
you know.
that and some of the locality stuff because I think that's so important. Um, the fact that we can't get any of these animals over here, well, legally, we can't.
Hmm.
Um, that's so important. At least in my
What,
opinion, and for me, it's like
what's
really
your
cool.
number one like locality that you want to work with or that you are working with?
It's going to be for me. It's going to be like Sulas and Bhutans. At one point in time, I had a large. Uh, I had a lot of Sulas and I had a lot of Bhutans at one point in time, and it's just like the Sulas that were bred at Jason's. Those were mine. Um, so that's
Now, you guys used to have, they were like the Makassar region Sulas, right? Like that kind of southeastern, the big triangles, pretty good,
yeah,
real
yeah,
clean
pretty much.
patterns.
But I don't really know exactly. I got them. I got a lot of that stuff from Nerd.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Okay.
Years ago, years and years ago.
Hmm.
But yeah, so like I said, that's important to me just for the simple fact that like once again, I think a lot of the animals that a lot of people are working with. I mean, the bloodlines are kind of muddied up. Kind of. I don't know if that's the
For
right way to
sure.
say it. Um,
What I call it whitewashed. All these whitewashed retics. You get a little Jamp, little Sumatran, little Malaysian,
right,
little bit of whatever, wherever the morphs happen to come from. And over time, they all kind of look the same. You
right.
just blended everything. You don't get those extreme differences. Let me ask you this: you plan to mix a little business with pleasure with the Sulas and the Ocelots? Is that a route you
Um,
consider going?
no, not really. I would try to right now, if I'm able to do anything like that, it's to try to keep it pure and strengthen up the bloodlines because we don't have a whole lot of it. I think right now, I think that's the most important thing.
Okay.
My opinion. So.
Oh, no, I absolutely agree and respect that. Yeah, I've gotten to the point because I have seven different localities that I'm specializing in, right? Which are all those dwarf and super dwarf islands. I also personally maintain 5 or 6 other localities, right? Just because I love this stuff, and I've kind of gotten to the point where my pure females, um, with very few exceptions, they just go like whatever pure locality, they just go to my males and we make pures out of the pure females and that's it. On the other hand, sometimes I got pure males that I like this look or I like that size or I like this or that or whatever it is that I'll blend into. Like, okay, one good example, we were talking about Karampas earlier, super busy, chaotic pattern. So kind of like what you used to do back in the day with the anthrax stuff, with the real speckly snakes and breeding that into anthrax, I bred my Karampa male into a super dwarf marble female because I wanted to see that the two busy patterns collide and kind of make the ultimate, marble or whatever it was. And because it's the male, I mean, he had already done his job with the ladies, got as many pure Karampas as we could possibly get for the year. And then he was just kind of sitting around anyway. So I think from that perspective, you ended up having like ocelot females. They're mixed up anyway. You know what I mean? They're not pure locality. But man, you started talking about those Sulas and you're talking about ocelots, and I was just getting this vision of like, ocelot with that like pixelated black and gold with big heavy borders, yellow heads, thick necks. You know what I mean? All that Sula. I don't know, buddy. You might have to do one breeding for me. One breeding.
It
one
could be
time.
cool. Definitely could be cool.
I just think that morph seems like it would really, especially because you said you want to clean it up. Sulas are known for having like the big donuts down the pattern, real clean, not a lot of speckling in the background usually. I don't know, buddy. That probably worked pretty sweet with some ocelot in it, don't you think?
It could.
They're like halfway there already.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Something to think about.
Yep.
Yeah. That's cool. Exciting stuff. How about you, Chip?
I honestly don't care about morphs, but I do have genetic stuff that I'm working with. A lot of secret stuff, but my main thing that I've been trying for years is while you're going for the smallest, I'm going for the biggest. Just like in that one live you did when people were talking about, the world's biggest and all this stuff. And in reality, there hasn't been an accurate snake, hitting that 24-foot mark. 23 foot and a little bit is about as big as we can accurately confirm. And
anything over 20 foot is a monster. And I'm sorry, guys, if you watched a YouTube video that says my 20-foot snake, that snake's not 20 feet. It's just not.
And right now, I have about 6 animals in my possession right now. 2 are at that mark, and I have genetics for some that could possibly be way bigger, what came from the parents and everything else. And the genetics on them and the growth rate on them are absolutely insane. It's nothing like I've ever seen in all the years I've been keeping retics. And so I'm hoping to hit
from like different sources, like some morph project, some locality, or are they?
They're all pure locality.
Okay, cool. Very cool.
Yep. And the one that I have that I'm growing up right now that it has the best potential is probably from the biggest male pure locality I've ever heard of. And this animal is well over 21 foot, and it's a male.
I love that. I didn't mean to cut you off or anything, but I love that because like you were saying something earlier, Garrett, about, not feeding your animal, this and that, blah, blah, blah. But, back in the day, always buy a male retic because they don't get that big. I have seen some of the biggest retics that I have ever seen were males.
Well, if they have big genetics, if you think about it, they never breed, right? So like females, even with big genetics, a certain amount of the energy that they have is going into that massive toll of reproduction every year.
Right.
Yep.
Males don't have that. they're exercising when they're breeding, and then they're packing that weight on, and they just get So I've seen some very large, male retics as well, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, and that's my exciting thing is keeping pure bloodlines, no inbreeding, keeping locality strong. But for years I've been chasing that true size of monsters, and my capabilities, my space. It's what I focused on. That's what we were talking about, and feeding the right diet. I'm not trying to make a fat snake. I'm very careful and meticulous on how I feed. And interactions and exercise and everything else. But, Stephen Dawson in the UK, he's got the UK covered. He's got those monsters over there. I'm trying to get that over here. And
does he actually keep a lot of the big ones? I know he's got a handful, but I don't think he has like lots of them.
He's got 25
a handful of giants.
He's got 25 massive animals, and about 10 of them are at that 20-foot mark, and 4 of them are over 20 and a half feet, and he's got 2 of them over 22 foot.
Oh, wow. That's a lot more than I realized, because I know that he actually goes around and like measures snakes and stuff like that too that aren't his. That was like a thing that he was doing for a while. So
and he actually found 2 of James's original Sulas that are over 21 feet long in Europe.
Really?
Yep.
Ah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
But that's my thing. I chase over around the U.S. and research and try and find those true animals. Just like when they wouldn't let me measure Medusa. I tried. They will not let me measure Medusa, and that's why I've seen that animal in person, and it's nowhere near what they claim to be, because I've had my hands on 20-foot snakes, and that's a 20-foot snake. That really is, but it's not 25 feet.
Yeah. I can do this. I can vouch for Twinkies. There's a lot of big size claims, and everyone's like, no way. Even Steve Dawson said it one time. But she was a big girl. She's about 21 feet, and the heaviest weight they ever got on her was over 300 pounds. So,
I know Twinkie. I know. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm just throwing it out there. Fun fact: she was actually that big. We never said she was 25 feet or whatever. But I remember it was really fun for me. I was a little younger. I was kind of a punk, so I liked when people who were looking at an internet picture were saying that they knew more than you when you were standing right there. And it's understandable because so many people exaggerate snakes. But I remember one time Steve Dawson was like, well, according to my records, if that snake was actually 21 feet and weighed that much, it would have a 34-inch girth. And so I was like, okay. So I took one of those little like Taylor tape measures and I wrapped it around her midsection. I was like, he ain't bad. She's at 32. You know what I mean? But like Snake had the same waistline as I did, you know what I mean? She's a monster. But it was pretty funny. I took a picture with it and put it on there. I was like, hey, you're right. You know what I mean? Guess what? So was I. So you're not right about all of it. But yeah.
And I remember when Twinkie hatched, I actually saw it before Samson bought her original name was T-Rex. And before Samson bought Twinkie off of Al, those 3
she came from the Baldagos.
That was
they had one of the first. Too.
Yeah, the first 3 A-males ever produced, and Twinkie was one of the first 3 visual A-males that came from Amelia. And Samson bought all 3 and 5 hets, and they all went to North Carolina, and they came out to Jay. But I mean, I remember before he bought them when Al brought them to the shows, and I had my hands on them when they were hatchlings.
Yeah. Her brother was a monster too. He was over 19 feet.
Yep, and so was the Tiger sibling. When the Tiger sibling came out there. Well, I bet you do, because there's a picture on the internet when they brought him out. Maybe you weren't working there at the time. I don't know.
Well, I remember they had some monster tiger head A-males there. Beautiful, big, bold like that, and they were huge. I just don't remember them ever being that they said that was, Twinkie's half brother, sister, whatever.
Yeah, the tigers that went out there, those monster males, those were the siblings.
They had two. Oh, okay. They had two big female tiger head males too. So
yeah,
whenever I was there, and they were older animals. So
yep, and those were some huge genetics, and of course, all the tigers and everything that was bred to make those came from Carl Herman. But what's weird, if you see, I follow all these genetics to find out what the bigs, and you follow back from Carl Herman tiger, the original tiger that started it all. He died at just under 13 feet and over 25 years old.
Yeah, he was pretty small.
Yeah, and
his genetics were big.
His genetics were big, and not only that, that tiger was bred to Sumatra big females that Bob and Monty had imported.
Yeah, that's kind of my resistance when people get these new localities in or whatever, and like, this is a dwarf and that's a dwarf and all this kind of stuff. The funny thing in my niche, I mean, first of all, it kind of depends on how you define dwarf. There's a lot of room for people making up their own definitions so that they can include their own animals. And if you want to do that, that's fine. Participation trophy, that's fine. But if you have localities that you don't even have like grown adults that are breeding and reproducing, that are captive bred animals, I'm always like, well, hold on now, just hold on a minute, because like James, your original Sulas and stuff. Well, I guess you were saying if you got yours from Nerd, were they captive bred or wild caught?
They're wild caught.
How big were they? The originals.
I
have a buddy that still has one from you, and she's probably 19 foot.
Are you asking how big they were when I got them?
No. Like, how big did they get? The original wild caught animals.
They weren't that big. They didn't get that big.
That's my point. So I've had a bunch of Sulas that never got past 13 foot, the biggest ones. Some of them were even smaller. But then when they laid and the babies grew up in captivity, they became monsters because the big genetics were there. But just like you were talking about these stunted alligators and all that kind of, you don't know what happened to those animals. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it could have been like, I don't know if you guys ever saw it, but if you go to a skin trade place in Indonesia, the way they keep these animals are in these terracotta pots, and they keep them in these pots. It's mostly blood pythons that they keep for a long time like that. But they basically put them in these little pots, and they've got this big, it's like a cork or whatever that they cover it up. The pot's shaped like this, and they cork it, and they put the animal in there, and then they water it by opening it and dumping some water in there and closing it, and they feed it by opening it, and they pry its mouth open, and they stuff a piece of meat down, like force feed it a piece of meat, like a chunk of beef or pork, or well, probably not pork. In Indonesia, they don't have a lot of that, but whatever the heck kind of meat they have, and they go through assembly line style. And they get them all big. And what they try to do is they get these larger, large-ish wild-caught animals. So, like, you think back to, like, Istana Ular, I'm talking about, an 8-foot-plus retic, and then they stuff them in these big clay pots that are easy and cheap for them to make. And if they break it, they get another one, whatever. And they just feed it up. Because, I mean, if I take a retic that's been a little bit underfed and I start power feeding it now, it's going to make up for lost time right quick. I bought a snake that was an adult. I hear this all the time too because of the dwarf thing. Like, well, I got this mainland. Supposedly it's a mainland, but can you tell me what locality it is? Because it's 4 feet. It's only 6 feet long and it's 4 years old, and it's a mainland. Well, these are just snakes that, they're buying like it's got some extra value to it. I'm like, well, I hate to tell you, but I think you just have an abused mainland here. You know what I mean? Like, there's not any extra value. Good on you that you got the animal. Try to give it a good home. It's clearly had a crappy past, but anyway, they keep them in these little pots and stuff. So a lot of these things, that's the way they lived, and who knows how long before they brought them over. You know what I'm saying? So, or even in the wild, like maybe it just sucked at being a good wild snake, and that's how they caught it in the first place. You know what I'm saying? Never ate, was starving, wandering around going, oh, for the love of God, even if the human picked me up, it'd be better than what I do to myself out here. We don't know. So if you got 13-foot snakes that produce 20-foot snakes in the wild, I could show you one of my pure Karampas or whatever. Like, I don't really expect they've never been bred in captivity, at least in the U.S. Outside of us. But I would expect their babies to get bigger than them because they look like crap. You know what I'm saying? They look like wherever they come from doesn't have food. You know what I'm saying? So unless you know the bloodline, the genetics you're working with, you gotta work that through at least one captive, minimum of one captive bred generation before you start saying this sucker's a dwarf. Otherwise, every wild caught retic ever brought in was a dwarf. Anyone ever see any 18-footers being imported? No. The shipping costs too much. You know what I'm saying? You don't see a lot of big snakes like that brought in.
Well, it's just like how I want my big ones, but I'm not guaranteeing that I'm hoping they hold the genetics for it. They look like they could hold the genetics for it, but it might not hit that 20-foot mark. Every condition and every genetic has to be right for me to hit that mark. People do not know how rare it is to get that magic 20-foot mark. It is so hard to find.
I think you could isolate it, though. I think you could do it. It just like, isolating out smaller genetics. It might take a couple generations. That's what people realize. Like, hey, I want a purple albino, but I want it small. That's a tall order. Yeah, if you're asking me for like a small super dwarf, well, James, you guys used to do a lot with tiger and platinum, right? You guys had a lot of platinum super dwarfs, tiger super dwarfs, and then later you guys got into some motley stuff. There were super dwarfs. You can shrink those down relatively quickly because they're incomplete dominant. So like every 18 months, you can have a generation back to super dwarf, right? But if you're talking about albinos, you breed the super dwarf and then you got to breed them together to make an albino. So it's 2 generations every time you shrink it down one step. So, if you want to get something that's like a 75% super dwarf albino, that's a nice high percentage of super dwarf or whatever, but you're in for 12, 15 year process there. Yeah. So I think if you give it 12 or 15 years of picking out monsters that bred monsters and made monsters, and you did that, you could probably isolate it pretty quick. I'll tell you my experience, and this might be something for you to use. I think that a lot of the size genetics comes from females. And mind you, I've been trying to make these snakes small for 20 years now. But you were talking about, I'll give you a familiar example. Al and Cindy Baldago, they had all those giant A-males. It was one of their original A-males that they went and, they sold it to Jessica Johnson. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
And she bred a male A-male from those big lines to a pure super dwarf. You remember this?
Yep.
I have one of the first A-male super dwarfs. I don't know that she actually ever produced them, but she ended up producing all the hets. And because it takes so long, she ended up, for whatever reason, moving those stuff out to Stephanie Lohmeyer. So Lohmeyer followed through on the project. And these 2 girls produced some of the first, super dwarf A-males was one of the first super dwarf morphs that were out there. And they are Am I there? Here, I saw my screen spin there. Beep, bup, bup, bup. Am I good?
You're pixelated, but I can hear you.
Oh, man, I don't know what happened.
Somebody's playing Minecraft.
Must be. Kids, get to bed. Anyway, so because they had used that super dwarf, they shrank down a lot. Now, on the hand, when they took, and these were not dwarves, I don't think they're dwarves by my opinion, but the type stuff was a smaller locality originally when they came in. And so dwarves, because they don't come from those 7 islands. That's my deal. But that you meant for another day. They were a smaller growing locality originally. So after pets, they took an albino, big albino female, and they bred a teeny little striped male to her. And the double hets, those first gen double hets, I think he still has at the shop there. Those suckers were 18 feet. Big snakes. So here on one hand, coming from a pure super dwarf female, the A-males, and I have never seen a big 50% or over Kalatoa A-male that's come out of that bloodline. Not once. Not in all these years, decades. Then you had these albino genetic stripes that all of the original females are huge,
Yep.
huge, monstrous things. And because they use the small male and the big female. So if you're trying to make monsters, I'm sure it would help to have a monstrous male as well.
Well,
but I would
that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Trust me, I already know all about that. Yeah, I've got my females here.
No. There you go. Yeah. I was going to say,
but the reason
sure
I want to, oh no, I've got the females, and the thing about it is I just didn't want to. I'm very picky about the males. I want the males to have the size genetics too, so I can have a double whammy on it. The females I've got taken care of. The females I've definitely got down pat. It's the males that I really wanted to focus on, so I could have more of a chance with the genetics lining up there. So trust me, I already know about that theory. I'm just hedging my bets with a big genetic male.
You guys like my Indonesia stories. Did I ever tell you about my giant retic experience out there in Indonesia?
Well, I heard it on your podcast. I don't know if James heard it.
No.
James, you know the one I'm talking about?
I don't believe I do.
All right. So this snake was claimed to be 24 feet. And I believe it. I've seen my number of big retics and stuff. This was a very big retic. I'll tell you that this thing, like Twinkie, she was a big girl. Her head was a monster. She wasn't just a big fat slug like everyone likes to make her out. She was a big snake. She was fat, but she was also very big. But this thing's head had to be 3 inches longer than Twinkie's head. It was just insanely huge. And it was East Java. Like, I don't know. You've got Javans. They don't typically not really that big. I think most Javans probably come from West Java. But this East Javan retic, I don't know, this is a freak or what. But a guy found it during a construction project. And everybody wanted to kill it. And they had captured it with a backhoe. You know what I mean? They kind of dug it out and pinned it down with his backhoe. And they're going to kill it and cook it and do whatever. And the guy's like, no, don't kill it. I want it. So he managed to like spread a tarp over it and catch it like a net almost. This huge wild caught retic. And then they took the equipment up. They literally just went like up to the road and dug a big hole and poured concrete in there. And they made this big pit and they put her in there. And then it had like a glass lid that you could lift, glass or plexi or whatever it was, a clear lid that you could lift up. So it was like a square hole in the ground that was concrete with a drain in it and a plexi lid that you could lift up. And you just see this huge coil of retic. The hole was probably, I don't know, 8 foot by 8 foot or something like that. And maybe 5 feet deep. And there's this huge coil. And what he did was he built this little bamboo shack around it. And then he put a coin jar out and you would pay money. You pay like, whatever equivalent of 50 cents or something like that. And you could go see the giant retic. It was like a sideshow attraction. You know what I'm saying? And so I was like, oh, we got to go see this. And it wasn't too far from where I was living. It was about an hour away. So I grabbed a couple of my German friends, these big professional soccer players. They're all like 6'3" big guys. We were all riding our motorcycles. We had like a little motorcycle club out there. We drive up this volcano to where this thing is up on this mountaintop. And we go look at it. And the little Indonesian dude is there. And I was asking him questions about it. And basically, he would collect enough money to go buy a whole bunch of chickens. And he said he would get up to 30 chickens and then he would feed it. When he had enough money to buy 30 chickens, he'd feed this snake a meal of 30 chickens. So you can imagine the size. And it was only once every couple of months or whatever that he was feeding the thing. And I said, well, I'll give you $5 if you let me play with it. And he's like, you're going to die. And, but there's no concept of liability in Indonesia or whatever. They let me hold a king cobra at a zoo there. I was like, can I hold it? And they're like, it's not tame. It's super venomous. It'll kill you. And I was like, that's okay. And they're like, well, all right. Like, hey guys, this American's going to die. Watch this. And he wants to hold this king cobra or whatever. Right. So, he basically like, you will surely die. And I'm like, that's okay. So I just want to get my hands on it. Right. So I put her in there and she's all coiled up. I couldn't see her head. Her head's in the coils somewhere. And so I'm like, moving this coil after coil, all this kind of stuff. And then I I picked her up and I kind of threw her and I see her move and I go down and I'd uncovered her head and she did that like, you know, big female retic does that like twitch, like don't touch me, you know what I mean? And I looked at her and we had that moment where like dun eye to eye, little Mexican standoff, you know? And then she just goes wham and strikes straight for my face as I'm holding a big coil. And I'm sure my eyes were this big, so a nice big heat signature right there to dial in, right? She strikes for my face, and I dropped her coil kind of, and I caught her mouth like this with my thumbs. And I was like, oh, you know, like I was trying to grab like around her neck, head, whatever, just kind of like deflect her or stop or something. But I ended up snagging my thumbs inside her mouth. And she's going like this, pushing at me. I'm like, whoa! And she slid me back, so her body's extended like this, and the coil here is pushed into the back corner of the little, you know, angle of the pit, right? So she's got about 8 foot of her body going like this, going. You ever see them like pushing in their cage with all their strength, trying to? So she's doing that, like you know, with her mouth open, going trying to get me, and I'm like and there was enough of her left to come back and throw some coils around me. So I had her tail and mid body coiled around me, and she had a coil around my arms and chest here, and then my belly and down on my legs and stuff. So I'm holding her like this. I got a coil here. I got a coil here. My arms are tied, and I've got this huge, huge head full of teeth, like coming at me. And she just didn't have very good leverage because she was stretched out 8 feet. Otherwise, she'd be rocking me by then. But I'm starting to also like lose my footing. I mean, you know, when those things are scared and or aggressive or whatever, how tight they squeeze. You know, you get a little 8-footer squeezing on your hand. You're like, wow, look how purple like I've had a few times where my wedding ring causes problems because they're squeezing so hard. You're like, oh, I'm going to break my finger against my wedding ring. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
So she's squeezing me like that on my body. And I'm screaming, Bantu, Bantu, like, help me, you know? And the 3 German dudes that I was with screamed like little girls, peed their pants, ran out of the tub. They just took off, started their motorcycles and drove away. You know what I mean? Like, you're dead. He told you were going to die, though, so it's your fault. I'm out. And they just took off and drove down the hill without me, left me there. The little... Hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I'm losing my mics over here. Hopefully I got enough juice on this one. I had my plug-in ones, but it wasn't working. So I'm screaming, help. The Indonesian guy runs in, and this is where I learned this trick. You've probably seen the video where I did this or whatever, but he grabbed a section of her tail that was, you know, wrapped up around my chest or neck or whatever. And so he's like face to face with me. And I just remember he like this, got a snake head here, Indonesian guy's face here, you know, bright red as a tomato, Garrett face getting squeezed the dickens out of him. And this guy grabs her tail and is like this, like and just starts biting her, just chewing on her. Like not a hard bite, but just like chomp all up and down her. And her whole body like shook and shivered like this, and just her coils dropped off. And I let her head go, and she reeled back in the cage, and we jumped out of that tub and like slammed the lid down. And I was like, bro, here's an extra $20. Thanks. You know what I mean? But it was nuts. And even that was years before I worked at Prehistoric. But because that was like 2001. No, let me get this straight. It was about 2004 that I was out there. And so many years later, I had told Jay about this. And when Twinkie was starting to look poorly towards the end there, he's like, well, I still want to have a giant retic for the zoo. You know what I mean? You think we could get this retic? And I said, well, let me call one of my buddies. He still lives out there. He went out there and I said, is there any way you guys can measure them? I showed him like the string method. You know what I mean? Just do this and all this kind of stuff. What they ended up doing was they took her out, they put that clear lid down and they drew a line down her spine and then they put her back in. You know what I'm saying? And so then they took the string and they measured it on the line that they had drawn on this clear lid, and it strung out over 21 feet. So there was a lot of guesswork in there, but the the core part that they got was she's something over 21 feet. So he's like, that's big enough for me. We should have like a little adventure and go out there and get it. And we never ended up doing it. But that was the biggest, to this day, that's the biggest retic I've ever seen or dealt with. It was a hilarious story. And it's also where I learned about the nibble on their tail trick. And I've gone to tell other people about it. Tons of people have learned about that through prehistoric, because when I showed, Tim O'Reilly, what they used to do is they would keep like alcohol, like mouthwash or something like that around and pour it on and try to do that. But I never liked that because that's like macing a snake. You know what I mean? It's probably your fault they're biting you anyway. So I don't like to just obliterate them. I mean, if you're saving somebody's life, sure. But I hate to see all these people with a 2-foot retic biting them or something because they weren't watching out for a food response. Like, I'm going to mace the crap out of you. Ha, ha, ha. Works every time. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, come on, guys. That's nasty to the snake. You're getting in heat pits and stuff. You don't even understand how that feels. We don't have those kind of. So there's a little nibble on the tail. It's more of a startle thing than anything else. And they drop and they'll let go. So it was pretty crazy. I learned that. They taught a bunch of people that. People all over America know that now. Pretty sure it was for me, but I've seen it 2 other times. One, there's a internet, like just random viral YouTube video that I saw of, you guys might have seen this. There was like 2 little Indonesian boys, and they're like, the one brother's like pulling his other brother out of a river, and they got like, looks like maybe an 8-foot retic wrapping up the little kid. They look like they were catching it on purpose. They were going hunting or fishing for this thing, because they're like wrestling it up and it's wrapping them, and he's like, and he's biting the tail. And they carry it, and then the little boy. Did you see this one, Chip? They carry him up, feet up the muddy river, and then it would wrap him up again. And they go, and they'd let go, and then carry him up. You know what I'm talking about? So I was like, this has got to be like some kind of common knowledge out there. I don't know if any of your Indonesian buddies are watching this. Then the other one was, I was reading a book to my kids about this boy and his adventures with animals growing up in Vietnam and stuff like that. And he was talking about his brother taught him how to catch pythons, and they would go in there and they let the python bite you and wrap you up, and then you get the tail and on the tail, and it would let you go, and then you put it in a sack or whatever. And I was like, I didn't know that this was like a thing, but yeah, it's people all over using it now, because we have a video where I had one of my interns, and I
saw that one.
Yeah, I was just being stupid. I was trying to do some training stuff with her, and she was filming on her cell phone. It was like her first time there, this poor girl. And I was like explaining food response. Now, retic's smart. They're very smart. They can definitely tell the difference between you and a food item, but they're strong food response. So we always pat them with a hook, before we remove them. And I don't know why I felt the need to, show this point, but I'm like, we should just see, though, if she could tell the difference. So I pet her on a hook. She was in food mode, but now she's kind of backed up. I'm going to offer her my forearm and let her smell it for a minute, and she'll probably realize it's not food and not even try to bite me. And I'm trying to teach her, like, they're not trying to eat you. They're just excited to get food. But it's pretty stupid to, like, what was that, 11, 12-foot retic? And I'm like, let me just give it my forearm. I'll show you. They don't want to eat you. Well, of course, she's like, whack. You know what I mean? Grabs me on the forearm, starts wrapping me up. And I'm like, you can see me in the video. I'm like, you know what I mean? And then I took
you walking outside.
Yeah, well, I took a minute because I was like, might as well use this as a trainable. My room is so small that if you're wrestling an angry retic and I got her in there, if I can't get her to the exit or whatever, I'm like, let's just get outside and get some space to work with it just in case. But she was like full sunk into my forearm, and we're already videotaped. I'm like, well, might as well show you how to deal with this scenario now. So I took it outside and nibbled on the tail, and I had that footage sitting around for like 6 months before I ever used it on YouTube, because I'm not the type of guy to, it's one thing if I'm doing a show and I can read the room and there's 10 people there. Like I said, even when I was younger, I'm like, oh, the snake bit me, haha, but I can explain it to you. On the internet, everything's taken out of context all the time. So you have any footage of a snake biting a person, and it's only going to be used to vilify the snakes later.
Yep.
So I'm not a proponent of putting that stuff up. Sometimes I'll do it with like a tiny baby in a way that makes them look very harmless to show this is not a reason to freak out. You get a little baby, they're defensive. It's okay. This is going to work with them, but never in like that was a pretty big snake. And I cut it immediately when it let go. I wanted to show how quickly it let go, but you know how this goes. They let go. You look good. You look like this for about a half a second. And then it's like, dripping blood everywhere, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty crazy. So good times with the retics. Well, the good old days. Yeah, I don't know. But growing up with horses, a snake bite was like never anything. I have like a little tiny 1/4-inch scar on one thumb to show from one pretty gnarly retic bite I got. About a 16-footer got me, and it just sliced a little. It's all I have to show for it. Horses, man, broken backs 3 times. Dogs, I've got big bites on my thighs, big bite marks from people's 20-pound tame pet dogs deciding they wanted to bite the dickens out of me at some point, stuff like that. Retics, really nothing, you know what I mean? It makes for a good story, but it's really not like all those guys you see blowing everything up on YouTube and stuff like that. That's for the people who don't know what they're looking at, because it seems dangerous and it seems crazy, but it's actually not that big a deal. It's like Hollywood stunts. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So.
Well, we're coming up on the 2-hour mark. You are actually our longest guest.
You got to cut me off sooner. I can go forever.
Yeah, even Kevin didn't talk this much.
New record.
Yay. Well, I would like to say thank you, and everybody needs to go out and check out Reach Out Reptiles YouTube, because there is a lot of great info and even more stuff that we didn't even cover on here or even get close to. Garrett's got a great channel, and when I'm at work, hopefully nobody from work's watching, when I'm sitting there and I see the live pop up, I get on there and I'll make a comment or two on there, but it's always good to hear from him, and he's actually got a lot of good things going, and I'm really happy he took the time out of his night to do this podcast with us.
Yes, sir. Definitely appreciate it. I want to thank all our supporters and everything. Hey, leave a comment down, like, subscribe, share the video. Like Chip said, man, go to Garrett's. He's got Reach Out Reptiles. He's got on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Like it, share it, show some love, man. Thanks a lot, man, for coming on. It was great.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys for having me. From the sounds of it, I might have to come check out the collection sometime. Sounds like you guys got a lot of fun stuff that I don't over there, so that'd be kind of cool.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you can handle the Great White North.
I think I'm versatile enough to take care of it. Yeah, we'll be fine. All right.
Is there anything you wanted to talk about or say, promote, or anything before you get off here?
No, that's it, guys. Just think about it before you get these animals, or any animal. If you're not ready to have an adult, don't buy the baby. Don't buy an American alligator if you don't want an American alligator. Don't buy a retic if you don't want a retic. You know what I'm saying? Get something that's going to suit you. Just know yourself a little bit better than that.
Also, one last thing. Please, if you're not doing it already, please support USARK. Donate. Become a member. If you're at a show, once again, you don't have a lot of money, whatever the case may be, if you see their table, donate $1, buy a bumper sticker, buy a t-shirt, something.
Share their stuff on your page and tell all your friends to support them if you don't have the money. You know what I mean? Get 40 other people to go and call it even. But yeah, absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, everybody, for watching and tuning in, and thank you, Garrett, again for being here.
Thank you, man. Y'all have a good one.
All right, you too.